Well, we're joined now by Peter Lilly, the former Conservative Secretary of State for Social Security, by Tony Wright, Chairman of the Public Administration Select Committee, who undertook an inquiry into cash for honours, and the Liberal Democrat MP, Norman Baker. Perfectly simple question to all of you. Would you accept an invitation to a yacht?
Yeah, I'd be extremely intrigued if someone were to invite me onto one of these fantastic yachts. I'd certainly accept.
You would have gone. Would you have gone?
No, I wouldn't, and I wouldn't then criticise others.
You wouldn't have gone even out of curiosity?
No, I wouldn't. Not if I was in a position to influence policy, which benefited the owner of the yacht subsequently.
But George Osborne wasn't. Peter Mandelson was, and he stayed on the yacht.
But
That's
he's
a different
Shadow
issue.
Chancellor.
I thought you were
just defining policy for the future Conservative government, we were told.
Not relative to Russian oligarchs or yachts.
Really? Well, he's also this guy is interested in financial matters. George Osborne's the Shadow Chancellor. There's also the issue of donations, and George Osborne's judgment, in my view, is faulty. He should have kept well away from this guy.
Tony Wright, you've got off telling us. Would you go on the yacht?
Well, I think, could I give some advice to George?
No, give me some.
Well,
I want to know, would you go?
I would have gone to Skegness, and I think I would advise George...
So if you were invited onto a yacht, you would intentionally go to Skegness instead?
I would advise George to change his holiday plans for next year.
Yeah, I'm not interested in your advice to George Osborne. I'm asking whether you would never...
Of course, no sensible person would go near a dodgy donor on a yacht or in a villa.
Well, at this point, he's not a donor at all, dodgy or not.
A potential dodgy donor.
Oh, well, so what does that mean?
An alleged dodgy donor.
Anyone's a potential donor,
What are the facts in this case? One of the facts in this case is that George Osborne has got his comeuppance for gossiping about Peter Mandelson. And the man has been revealed... The real charge against him from Mr. Goldsmith is that he's a cad and a bounder. He blabbed. He broke the rules of public school confidence, and he's being punished by it.
And
the second charge is that he associated with a Russian billionaire, and discussions were had about a possible donation to the Conservative Party, which would have been illegal.
But not discussions with the potential donor?
Well, we know various things, don't we? We know that we
don't know that happened.
No, we know that he took
his... In that case, I suggest you stop saying it did happen.
We know that he took his Conservative fundraiser to the villa, that there was discussion about donation, there was then a visit to the yacht, and then there was a subsequent telephone call to discuss donations after that.
This is a real postmodern donation mystery. There was no donation.
What on earth does that mean?
Well, you know, in old-style mysteries, there were actually donations given and received. In this case, none was solicited, none was given, none was received.
Yeah.
All that happened was that there were meetings in an exotic location with a fabulously wealthy person on a great yacht.
But it's not quite that, Peter, is it?
That helps us fill out an evening when we should perhaps be discussing the world economic crisis, which I trust you will later.
We are going to be discussing the world economic crisis very shortly, or at least our part in it. But I want to talk a bit about what on earth this looks like for the general public.
Of course, exactly. That is a question.
This looks terrible, doesn't it? All across the land, people are having their houses repossessed. They've got rising food bills, oil bills and everything else, and they see elected representatives going off on luxury yachts owned by Russian billionaires.
Well, he had tea for an afternoon. I understand Peter Mandelson was staying on the yacht. This somehow isn't mentioned. One does detect a certain influence of Mr. Mandelson in this whole story. No. The one thing that has changed is Mr. Mandelson's come back, and the sort of old-style control of the media.
There is something in that.
The beginning of
He's back in government 2 weeks, and this happens.
No, and what happened? Mandelson returned, and there was immediately a Get Mandelson campaign started, which George Osborne cleverly thought he could get going. The media took it up. The consequence has been that Mr. Osborne's own friend, Mr. Goldsmith...
Mr. Rothschild.
Mr. Rothschild has now broken his friendship with Mr. Osborne because he thinks that he's been betrayed by him.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself why.
So it's a case of bad manners?
I think part of it is, I say, the cad and the bounder point.
What on earth we're doing discussing it then?
This is almost as gripping as the Archers, isn't it?
It isn't mere bad manners, because here we've got George Osborne with a very close friend who he took a week's holiday free of charge from, and then this guy, Mr. you got me at it now, actually writes to the paper and said that George Osborne solicited a donation, and that's a very peculiar attitude for a friend. And when George Osborne comes out with the chronology this afternoon, here he is subsequently with a further statement to criticise that and say it's not true.
Leave aside.
But you're a man who can see a conspiracy in an order for 5 cups of tea, aren't you?
No, I don't think so, actually.
Leave aside what we think about yachts and leave aside what we think about villas. The simple fact is, once the issue of donations arose in the context of a foreign billionaire, George Osborne should have run a mile and not sought to get closer. That's the fundamental misjudgment
So
here.
that's a question of judgment. What's the broader, if indeed there is in this postmodern mystery, is there a broader lesson we have to learn about the way in which politics is funded?
There's an issue about funding, absolutely. And we had a situation where almost a year ago, with the Hayden Phillips recommendations, all three parties were close to accepting a cap on donations of £50,000 and a cap on expenditure. And I have to say the Tories walked away from that. When all three parties were ready to accept it, they walked away from it. And the government seems to have walked away as well, because the bill this week in Parliament is an empty bill with nothing in it, which we passed on Monday. And we have to get away from...
In the midst of a financial crisis, people want to pay taxes so they can fund parties telling half-truths about other parties.
They already do fund parties through short money in the House of Commons and other means as well. What people do want is honest politicians. They don't want people who are on yachts with Russian billionaires.
I don't think you want politics being driven by politicians trying to suck up to rich people all the time, because that distorts our politics.
There's not the slightest evidence that was going on.
Well, I'm afraid it's been going on for a long time. The tragedy is, and you mentioned the loans for peerages issue. When that happened, what Tony Blair did was to set up the Hayden Phillips review, senior former civil servant. Those talks were making progress. Their set of proposals came forward, and as Norman says, and it's a great tragedy, we were in sight of getting an agreed package of reforms in this whole area that would have capped donations, done all of it, and the Conservatives collapsed those talks because they thought they could find some party advantage in doing so.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with both my colleagues here that I would like to see a low cap on total expenditure, a low cap on individual donations and union donations and company donations. One of the great joys of being a politician in this country is within our own constituencies we can only spend a very small sum, so we don't have to spend our time soliciting money as American and other politicians do. At a national level, it would help if there were similar low levels. I'm sorry that agreement wasn't reached. I think it was to do with the position of the unions in the whole deal, though I haven't been close to it, so I accept your rebuke in your eyes if that wasn't the case. But that doesn't mean to say that we should immediately blame people for meeting rich people. If you meet rich people, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you don't ask for or accept money from them.
As grown-ups, whatever the funding arrangements, inevitably powerful people, rich people, politicians, members of government, European commissioners and so on, are going to bump into each other, talk to each other and seek to influence each other. That's going to happen.
There's a difference between
and there's no need to see a conspiracy every time, is there?
There's a difference between meeting people, which is perfectly proper in your line of job, whatever you are, you're a commissioner or a minister, and accepting hospitality from them on their own yacht and everything else. That's a difference.
Let's just be clear, Jeremy. The charge here, the essential charge is that there was a contamination that came from being associated with a foreign...
There's a contamination you're now trying to foster by repeating it. No donation was solicited, none was given, no funds changed hands, no story.
And we know that there was a discussion about how you might overcome the foreign billionaire problem by putting the money through a domestic company and therefore circumventing the rules.
Well,
now, once that
we know there was a discussion. We do not know that that was the nature of the discussion.
Once there was a discussion, George Osborne, using his judgment, should have said no more. When Gordon Brown was Shadow Chancellor, he was fastidious in keeping away from party funding issues. George Osborne should have done the same.
Why is it that Nat Rothschild suggests in a letter to the Times that a donation was solicited? Why should he do that if it's not true?
Well, I don't know. Why don't you ask him?
Well, I will do if I get the chance.
So you believe every allegation everybody makes must be true?
It's an extraordinary thing to do for a friend to write to a paper with that allegation.
Why would Mr. Rothschild, who's an old friend of George Osborne, who's someone who contributes to Conservative Party fundraising, want to make this allegation if it wasn't true?
Well, we don't know, and we can't ask him, but we do know it's been denied by George Osborne.
It's a fairly decent question, isn't it?
We do know that none was solicited by George. None was given by this chap.
We don't know none was solicited.
So you're trying to rake up something that didn't happen.
All right, chaps. Well, I think we'll leave it there. We're not making any progress at all. Thank you very much.